All right, let's get right into it. We're going to be talking about the architecture of control. You know, those invisible systems that are kind of running in the background, shaping everything from our own thoughts to, well, the entire machinery of society. We're going to look at our minds as these hackable operating systems, see how reality itself can be rewritten, and even check out the old school manuals for both control and its opposite, sabotage.
This quote, it just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that feeling we've all had, that sense that you're dealing with something that isn't human, a system that has its own agenda. It's not there to serve you. It's there to keep itself going. And that really sets up the big question for us today. In a world that's built on code and commands, who, or maybe what, is actually in charge? So if we want to understand control on this huge societal scale, we've got to start small, like really, really small. We have to start with let's call it the operating system that's running inside each of our heads. Because before any system out there can influence us, our own mind has to be programmed to even accept the input in the first place.
Yeah, so this idea comes from a surgeon, of all people, Maxwell Maltz. He called the mind a servo mechanism. Think of it like the guidance system in a torpedo. You feed it a target, and that target is your self-image, and it just unconsciously steers you right towards it. Now, here's the really scary part. The mechanism couldn't care less if the target is success or if it's failure. It just runs the program.
So how does this programming get locked in? Well, it's this simple but incredibly powerful feedback loop. It starts when we accept an idea as true. Then, that belief gains this kind of hypnotic power over our actions. And then, and this is the kicker, we start acting in ways that confirm the belief, which just reinforces the whole cycle. We basically hypnotize ourselves with our own assumptions.
And you know, thinkers throughout history have been describing these, let's call them glitches in our internal code. The psychologist Carl Jung, he called it inflation. This moment where your ego gets totally swamped by the unconscious mind and you start thinking you're a god or something. Centuries before that, the poet William Blake called these same forces specters, the dark, delusional parts of us that we have to fight. But the warning from both is exactly the same. If you don't face these internal glitches, they will absolutely consume you.
Okay, so we've seen how our own personal reality can get twisted by these internal bugs. Now let's zoom out. What happens when those bugs stop being bugs and start being features? Features that are exploited by much, much larger systems designed to hack not just one person, but an entire culture? This quote is just the perfect doorway into that idea. It suggests our collective reality, what we all agree on, isn't some fixed, solid thing. It's a story, a rumor that's constantly writing and rewriting itself. And if reality is just a story, well, that means it can be edited. It can be hacked. And this brings us to this really wild concept from the edge of philosophy called hyperstition. A hyperstition isn't just a regular old belief. It is a fiction that makes itself true just by existing, just by being passed around. You can think of it like a mimetic virus, an idea so powerful it slips right past our rational defenses and literally starts reshaping the world to match its own story. It's basically weaponized language. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. Take the language of technology. Words like users, engagement, data, they sound like harmless descriptions, right? But from this point of view, they're not. They're more like incantations. They magically summon the very system they claim to be describing. The fiction of surveillance capitalism, this idea that all human behavior can be predicted and sold, it became so powerful, so hyperstitional, that it created the economic and social reality that we're all living in now. So let's move from the abstract to a really concrete example. We're going to look at Project 2025. Now, no matter what your politics are, if you look at how news outlets have reported on this project, it's framed as a documented, deliberate blueprint to rewrite the source code of a major system, in this case, the U.S. federal government. And the sheer scale of what's being reported by journalists is, well, it's massive. We're talking about a document that's over 900 pages long, a detailed plan to transform pretty much every single part of the executive branch. And according to those news reports, the objectives are just sweeping. The plan lays out a total overhaul, Everything from taking direct control of agencies that are supposed to be independent to completely repurposing environmental departments. And what's really crucial for our conversation is that it extends to cultural institutions like the Smithsonian, aiming to rewrite exhibits to align them with one very specific version of history. And this quote, which was reported in the press, really gets to the core of it. The goal isn't just about changing some administrative rules. It's about ideological alignment. It's an explicit attempt to make sure that the institutions that tell a country's story all tell the same story from one specific point of view. It's the logic of hacking reality, but written down as public policy. But for every system of control, you can usually find a counter manual. So let's switch gears and look at this amazing historical document, the OSS Simple Sabotage Field Manual from 1944. It is basically a user's guide for regular citizens on how to inject friction, chaos, and inefficiency into an enemy's system.
So the manual lays out two main kinds of sabotage. The first is what you'd probably expect, physical destruction with simple tools. But the second kind is way more subtle and honestly probably more relevant to us today. It was called the human element. This is sabotage not by breaking things, but by blocking them through purposeful stupidity, endless arguments, and just creating delay after delay.
I mean, just look at these tactics. They sound kind of familiar, right? This wasn't a plan for spies with bombs. It was a guide for any office worker, any manager. And the strategy is just brilliant. Don't break the rules, weaponize them. Use the system's own bureaucracy, its committees, its obsession with wording to grind the whole thing to a halt.
Okay, so let's try to bring all of this together. We've talked about internal glitches, external hacks, and even historical sabotage. So what does resistance even look like now? In our world of digital surveillance and algorithmic management, what's the modern way to throw a little sand in the gears? Let's remember this tactic from that 1944 manual. The goal here isn't just to do a bad job. It's to create inefficiency while having total plausible deniability. It's a quiet little refusal, but it's disguised as just simple incompetence. Now, listen to this modern take on it. The courage to disappoint the spreadsheet. Wow. I mean, that just brilliantly updates that whole idea for right now. The enemy isn't some foreign government anymore. It's the endless demand for optimization, for productivity that can be measured, for a life that has to fit neatly into the columns of a spreadsheet. And the refusal, it's no longer loud and destructive. It's quiet. It's personal. It's that simple, courageous act of just not meeting the system's expectations. And so that really leaves us with this one last question to chew on. In a system that's designed to see everything, to track everything, where every single one of our actions becomes data, what is the power of a quiet refusal? What is the value of an act of defiance that the system can't even see because it leaves no trace behind? That right there might be the most important question for anyone trying to find a little bit of freedom inside the architecture of control.